What if one of history's most significant religious figures never existed? What if the story of Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, was not a biographical account, but a carefully constructed narrative crafted centuries later for religious and political purposes? How is this possible? The earliest Islamic sources are riddled with inconsistencies, gaps, and contradictions, and the contemporary evidence of Muhammad's life is conspicuously absent. The primary sources detailing Muhammad's life, the Quran, Hadith collections, and sira literature, form the foundation of Islamic tradition. However, upon closer examination, these sources reveal significant issues that cast doubt on their reliability. The Quran is considered the Word of God as revealed to Muhammad, but it provides little information about the life of the Prophet himself. Unlike religious texts such as the New Testament, which contain detailed narratives about the life of Jesus, the Quran focuses almost entirely on theological content and legal principles. The biographical details we associate with Muhammad's life come not from the Quran, but from hadiths, sayings and actions attributed to Muhammad, and the sira, which are biographical accounts written much later. The earliest hadith collections were compiled approximately 150 to 250 years after Muhammad's death. During this period, the oral traditions that formed the basis of the hadiths were subject to transmission across vast geographic regions. Given the time gap and the reliance on oral transmission, historians question the accuracy and authenticity of these accounts. Many hadiths were fabricated or altered to support political agendas during the early Islamic Caliphates. Similarly, the sira literature was written even later. The most prominent early biographer, Ibn Ishaq, died in 767 CE, over a century after Muhammad's death. His work was further edited by Ibn Hisham, who admitted to omitting parts he deemed objectionable. This late compilation and editorial revision of Muhammad's biography raised serious questions about how much of it reflects historical reality. Islamic history relies heavily on oral tradition, with stories about Muhammad's life being transmitted orally for generations before being written down. While oral tradition can preserve core elements of stories, it is also prone to embellishment, distortion, and omission. In the politically charged environment of early Islam, competing factions had strong incentives to alter or invent narratives about Muhammad to bolster their legitimacy. One of the most striking issues raised by revisionist scholars is the absence of contemporary evidence for Muhammad's life in the early Islamic narrative. Unlike other major religious figures such as Jesus or the Buddha, whose existence is supported by a mix of religious texts and non-religious contemporary sources, Muhammad's life is almost exclusively documented in Islamic sources compiled long after his supposed death. This gap in contemporaneous records raises significant doubts about the traditional narrative. Despite the rapid expansion of the early Arab Empire during Muhammad's lifetime and shortly afterward, there are no independent records from neighboring civilizations, such as the Byzantines, Persians, or Syrians, that mention Muhammad during his lifetime. This absence is particularly puzzling given the significant interactions between Arab tribes and these empires before and during the rise of Islam. Several early non-Muslim accounts of the Arab conquests do exist, but they often lack any reference to Muhammad or Islam. For example, Byzantine chroniclers writing shortly after the Arab invasions refer to the conquerors as Saracens or simply as Arabs, without mentioning any new religious leader or prophet. The absence of Muhammad's name in these accounts suggests that the early Arab forces may not have identified themselves with a prophet or a fully developed religion at the time. Scholars propose that Islam as a distinct religion may have developed gradually, and that the figure of Muhammad was retroactively introduced to provide a cohesive narrative for the emerging faith. Inscriptions and documents from the early 7th century reveal that the early Arab rulers practiced a form of monotheism that emphasized submission to a single God, Allah, but lacked many of the defining characteristics of later Islam, such as specific references to Muhammad or the 5 pillars of Islamic practice. For instance, the Dome of the Rock, built in 691 CE in Jerusalem during the reign of the Umayyad Caliph Abd al-Malik, contains inscriptions referencing monotheism and the Quran, but does not mention Muhammad by name. This omission is significant, as it suggests that the centrality of Muhammad in Islamic doctrine may not have been established until later. Another key piece of evidence cited by revisionist historians is the analysis of early Islamic coins and inscriptions. The earliest Arab Byzantine and Arab Sasanian coins, minted shortly after the Arab conquests, feature religious inscriptions mentioning Allah but omit any reference to Muhammad. It is only decades later that coins bearing Muhammad's name begin to appear, suggesting that the narrative surrounding him was solidified over time rather than being an established part of early Arab identity. In addition, early inscriptions found in regions conquered by the Arabs often reflect a monotheistic faith without mentioning specific Islamic practices or Muhammad. This stands in stark contrast to later inscriptions and texts that prominently feature the Prophet's name and detailed aspects of Islamic law. Several prominent revisionist theories have emerged over the years, challenging the traditional narrative of Muhammad's existence and proposing alternative explanations for the origins of Islam. These theories argue that Islam, as we know it today, was not the result of a single prophetic figure's revelations, but rather a gradual religious and political development shaped by various influences in the early Arab Empire. One of the most well-known revisionist theories is presented by Patricia Crone and Michael Cook in their seminal work, Hagarism: The Making of the Islamic World. They argue that early Islam was not initially a distinct religion, but rather a reformist movement within a broader monotheistic context, heavily influenced by Judaism and Christianity. Crone and Cook suggest that the early Arabs adopted monotheism during their expansion, and that Islam gradually emerged as a distinct faith through interaction with other religious groups. According to this theory, Muhammad's role was retroactively inserted into the narrative to give the new religion a clear founder and prophetic legitimacy. The result was a carefully crafted story that provided religious unity for the rapidly growing Arab Empire. Another theory posits that Islam was initially a political ideology used to consolidate power during the formation of the Arab Empire. In this view, early Arab rulers emphasized monotheism to distinguish themselves from their Byzantine and Persian adversaries, but the specific figure of Muhammad did not play a central role until later. The emergence of a cohesive Islamic identity, complete with a founding prophet, occurred under the Umayyad and Abbasid Caliphates. These rulers, facing internal divisions and external threats, needed a unifying religious narrative. By elevating Muhammad to the status of a prophet and codifying his life story, they legitimized their rule and provided a shared religious identity for the diverse peoples of the empire. The Umayyad dynasty, from 661 to 750 CE, played a crucial role in shaping early Islamic history. While the Umayyads initially presented themselves as monotheistic rulers without emphasizing Muhammad's prophethood, evidence suggests that during the later Umayyad period, efforts were made to standardize Islamic doctrine and integrate Muhammad into the religious framework. This process continued and intensified under the Abbasid dynasty from 750 to 1258 CE, which sought to distinguish itself from its Umayyad predecessors by promoting a more orthodox form of Islam. The Abbasids sponsored the compilation of Hadiths and the development of the sira literature, effectively solidifying the narrative of Muhammad as the central figure of Islam. The creation of the Muhammad narrative served multiple purposes. First, it provided religious legitimacy for the ruling elite. By portraying themselves as the successors of a divinely appointed prophet, the caliphs could claim both spiritual and political authority. Second, it helped unify the diverse peoples of the empire under a common religious identity, reducing the risk of rebellion and dissent. Moreover, attributing religious practices and legal codes to a single prophetic figure gave those practices greater authority. By framing Islamic law as divinely revealed through Muhammad, early Islamic leaders ensured compliance and stability within their territories. Evidence from early Islamic practices further supports the theory that the narrative of Muhammad was developed over time. For example, early descriptions of Arab religious practices such as prayer and pilgrimage do not match the detailed rituals described in later Islamic texts. Some scholars argue that these practices were initially adapted from existing Jewish and Christian traditions and only later codified and attributed to Muhammad. This gradual codification process is evident in the development of Islamic jurisprudence. The earliest legal schools often relied on local customs and pre-Islamic traditions, with references to Muhammad's sayings and actions becoming more prominent only in later periods. One of the most critical areas of evidence for revisionist theories about Muhammad's existence comes from the study of early Quranic manuscripts. While traditional Islamic belief holds that the Quran was compiled during Muhammad's lifetime or shortly thereafter, historical and textual analysis of early manuscripts suggests a more complex and protracted process of compilation. The discovery of early Quranic manuscripts, such as the Sana'a manuscript found in Yemen in the 1970s, has provided valuable insights into the evolution of the Quranic text. These early manuscripts show textual variations, corrections, and evidence of editing, which contradict the traditional belief that the Quran was preserved perfectly and without alteration. Radiocarbon dating of the Sana'a manuscript places it between the late 6th and early 7th centuries, potentially overlapping with Muhammad's supposed lifetime. However, the textual differences and layering of the manuscript suggest that the Quran may have been compiled from various sources over time, rather than being a single unified revelation delivered to one individual. Further analysis of early manuscripts reveals that the text lacked diacritical marks, making it ambiguous and open to multiple interpretations. This ambiguity supports the theory that early versions of the Quran were more fluid, with the standardized version emerging only later under the Umayyad and Abbasid Caliphates. One of the most significant figures in the early history of Islam is Abd al-Malik ibn Marwan, the fifth Umayyad Caliph, who reigned from 685 to 705 CE. Historical evidence suggests that Abd al-Malik played a key role in standardizing the Quran and promoting a unified religious identity across the Arab Empire. During Abd al-Malik's reign, the Dome of the Rock was constructed in Jerusalem, featuring inscriptions that include Quranic verses emphasizing monotheism and rejecting the Christian doctrine of the Trinity. However, these inscriptions do not mention Muhammad by name, further supporting the theory that the narrative surrounding Muhammad was still being developed at that time. The first fully standardized version of the Quran is traditionally attributed to the third caliph, Uthman ibn Affan, but revisionist scholars argue that the actual standardization process likely took place under Abd al-Malik. This would explain the discrepancies in early manuscripts and the gradual emergence of the Quranic text as we know it today. Unlike other religious texts that provide detailed accounts of their central figures, the Quran contains very little biographical information about Muhammad. The Quran mentions a messenger and prophet in several verses, but offers no details about his life, family, or personal experiences. This lack of biographical content is unusual for a text purportedly revealed to a specific individual and intended to guide his followers. Some scholars propose that the figure of Muhammad was retroactively inserted into the Quranic narrative during the compilation of Hadiths and the sira literature. By doing so, early Islamic leaders could create a cohesive story that linked the Quran to a single prophetic figure, thereby strengthening its authority. Archaeological evidence from the early Islamic period is sparse and often inconclusive. Unlike other ancient civilizations that left behind extensive records, monuments, and inscriptions, early Islamic archaeology provides little direct evidence of Muhammad's existence or the early development of Islam. Excavations in key historical sites, such as Mecca and Medina, have yielded minimal findings that can be definitively linked to the early Islamic period. Some scholars attribute this to the lack of archaeological activity in these regions, while others suggest that the absence of evidence may indicate that the traditional narrative was constructed later and does not reflect historical reality. The theory that Muhammad may not have existed as traditionally described carries significant implications for both the historical study of early Islam and the broader understanding of religious development. If true, this theory would not only alter the historical narrative of the Arab Empire, but also challenge the foundational beliefs of over 1 billion people worldwide. If Muhammad's story was constructed or heavily modified long after his purported lifetime, early Islamic history would need to be rewritten. Instead of a faith emerging from a prophet's revelations, Islam could be viewed as the product of a gradual fusion of existing monotheistic traditions and political necessity. The traditional narrative attributes the rapid Arab conquests of the 7th century to religious zeal inspired by Muhammad and his message. However, if Muhammad's role was retroactively added, these conquests may have been driven primarily by political expansion and the desire for control over trade routes and resources, with religious identity forming only later. Early Arab identity may have been more closely tied to a general form of monotheism than to a specific religion centered on Muhammad. The gradual codification of Islamic practices and the introduction of a prophetic figure could have been a way to unify diverse tribal groups under a common ideology. For Islam, the figure of Muhammad is central not only as a prophet but also as a model for personal conduct. The Hadiths, which detail his actions and sayings, serve as a primary source for Islamic law or Sharia and ethics. If Muhammad's existence is questioned, the legitimacy of these sources becomes uncertain. Without Muhammad, many aspects of Islamic doctrine, such as the 5 pillars of Islam, would lose their prophetic basis. This could lead to a re-evaluation of Islamic practices and beliefs as products of historical evolution rather than divine revelation. The authority of religious scholars and institutions, which is often based on the interpretation of Muhammad's life and teachings, would be undermined. This could open the door for reformist movements within Islam that seek to reinterpret its teachings in light of historical evidence. The case of Muhammad's historicity is not unique. Similar debates have taken place regarding other religious figures, such as Moses and even Jesus. If the theory that Muhammad did not exist gains wider acceptance, it could encourage scholars to apply similar critical methods to other religious traditions. This theory highlights the importance of historical criticism in understanding the origins of religions. By questioning traditional narratives, scholars can uncover the complex processes through which religions and their texts evolve. Viewing Islam as a product of gradual religious and political development, rather than as the result of a single prophetic figure's revelations, provides a new perspective on how major world religions emerge and spread. The theory that Muhammad may not have existed as traditionally described is a provocative and controversial idea that challenges long-held beliefs. While mainstream historians and Islamic scholars continue to affirm the traditional narrative, revisionist theories based on gaps in contemporary evidence, late compilation of sources, and political motives provide an alternative explanation for the origins of Islam. Ultimately, whether or not Muhammad existed, the narrative attributed to him has undeniably shaped history, politics, and culture for over a millennium. This theory invites us to approach religious history with a critical eye, acknowledging the complexity of its formation and the power of narratives in shaping human civilization. If you enjoy our content, we'd love your support. By joining one of our channel memberships, you help us continue creating videos like this one while gaining access to some amazing perks. As a member, you'll unlock exclusive content available only to supporters, earn loyalty badges to show off in comments and live chats, and enjoy priority responses to your comments, shoutouts, and more. The best part? Memberships start at just $2.99 a month, less than a cup of coffee. Even small contributions make a big difference for the PJ Bible TV team in covering production costs and delivering the content you love. And if you're not ready to become a channel member today but still want to support us, there are other ways to help. Engaging with our videos is a tremendous way to show your support. By taking just a few moments to like the video, share it with friends, family, or on social media, and leave a comment, You're telling the YouTube algorithm to share our content with more people. Your support, no matter how you choose to show it, means the world to us. Thank you for being part of the PJ Bible TV community.